Hello, guys, and welcome to the first episode this year of The Film Angle. Alex, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Chris. Happy New Year.
Well, what did you get up to in the new year? I haven't talked to you since our last episode.
Well, what have I been doing? Just kind of eating, drinking, relaxing,
Just being in a bum.
just being a bum, which is I think is kind of like Christmas does that to you, doesn't it? Christmas, New Year time, and now it's time to get out of that headspace and get back to the gym, get back to work, and get on with things. But no. What about yourself?
Same. Absolutely being a slob. I think the only thing productive probably is the daily dog walk. That's probably the most productive part of the day. I love Christmas because it's just a great chance for me to catch up on movies. And I definitely took that opportunity in abundance. So no, it was good. It's my ideal way to spend Christmas is just to chill out, and definitely achieved that. So it's a new year now. Tomorrow is back to work, and yeah, like we were saying just before we were recording, it's trying to remember where we left off and the work that's going to be left for us and waiting for us when we get back tomorrow is it's going to be a personality challenge.
We'll get back into the swing of things.
I'm sure. But today we kind of teased this a few episodes ago. We are going over our lists of top 10 films of the year, respectively. You have a list, I have a list. We sent these to each other last night. I think I was even still toggling my list a couple hours even before starting this episode. There is just so many movies that caught up with in 22. So and 21 that actually were released in the UK this year. So if you feel like, if you're an American listener or from overseas and you're listening to this episode and wondering why we're talking about a movie from 21, well, that's because it was released in the UK in 22. So
see, this is the horrible thing about like the year-end list, isn't it? Like I try to do mine off kind of wide US release, because if not, you end up talking about films that were really in the conversation in 2021. You know, like films like Licorice Pizza and stuff like that. I'm not going to put them in my 2022 list, even though they released in the UK this year. I don't know why. I just don't like it. Just doesn't feel right. So I try and base it off that. But then there's the other thing of like, there are films that have come out in the States that aren't out in the UK, which potentially could make our number 10s just from general feelings alone. I'm thinking The Fabelmans, and I'm hearing a lot of stuff about Babylon, and I've really loved Damien Chazelle's previous film. So you kind of make sure, would those things break my top 10? But we're not going to know till late January at this point, and that's semi-frustrating. But at the same time, yeah, this is my top 10 of what I've seen from the 2022 slate. But I don't know, how do you feel about lists, Chris? Because I kind of love them, but I also hate them, because like my 10 films in this list have all, like, they were pretty locked in the last couple of days, but their order has changed around a bit. Like, this is how I feel right now at this very moment, but these things change. How do you feel about like ranking films in this way?
It's really hard because it's something that is purely based on preference, as opposed to technicality of what is the best movie. This is really more like, to me, it's something that's more personal, and day to day I feel different. So what I'm attuned to, for example, some days like a big dumb blockbuster is like all I'm thinking about, and the next day I'm like, I want something a bit more sad or thought-provoking, and it's just really where I'm at in the spot and what's really like ticking over in my head. Because movies for me, especially the ones that really work, are the ones that kind of replay in your mind on a day-to-day basis, and those are kind of the ones that stay in your top 10, and that kind of is how I base it for me.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. It's not always like this is the best film, but almost sometimes it's like this is the film I had the most fun with. Do I really, just to tease, but do I really think that this kind of big flashy film about pilots is better than this quiet little father-daughter little trip down memory lane grief kind of film? Probably not. Like that little film's probably better, but at the same time, I really enjoyed the fighter jet film.
Yeah, exactly. And you try to take everything as its own. You know, it's that movie you're talking about, the first one, the fighter jet one, or the one that's about the father or the daughter. They're two different categories, and you have to evaluate them within their own categories and not compare them to each other. So was a Star Wars movie the best version of that Star Wars movie it could be, and was this independent drama the best version of that it could be, and then you kind of take it from there. But there's always going to be a bias, so please bear that in mind. But I tried to be as objective as possible with this list. Will not have succeeded, but these are the top 10 movies, sort of, in my mind, at this moment as we record.
I've gone with the heart. Gone with the heart, not with the head.
Yeah. That's the way it's got to be.
What did you think of 2022 in general, just as a year for films?
Well, in my mind, before I made this list, I thought that it was sort of a mixed bag, but actually there was some pretty good solid films here, considering that we're coming out of a pandemic. Well, might be coming back into actually. But it's been an interesting year. It's been an aftermath sort of year, and just things have been picked up, productions that are being late, or had to deal with the process of having to deal with a big epidemic pandemic like that. So it was kind of interesting. There was actually a lot of solid films, a lot of movies that on my Letterboxd page, I give kind of solid 3.5 star sort of ratings to. So I think it was a year of pretty solid movies with 10 to 20 exceptional films.
Yeah. I also thought it was like quite a good year for the some of the kind of big studio releases, the films where they said, here's $100 million, director, and just take a big swing with it. And I thought there was some really interesting kind of bigger films released. And I think maybe we're catching up now with some of the smaller stuff that's going to come out in the next year. That being said, I also think 2023 is like riddled with kind of amazing directors releasing new films, and I think 2023 could be set to be a better year than 22, but I think overall 22 has been a pretty good year for films.
Yeah, I think 23 is going to be a bigger year for the blockbuster,
Do you
and
think?
there's so much lined up. But I think 22 didn't actually have that many those traditional blockbuster movies. I just think the two or three of them that were the blockbusters of the years were just so ingrained in our psyche and were so good that it felt like we had a lot of big blockbusters this year. I think that's more the case. And I think when I'm looking at the timeline for this year now, 2023, there's a lot of stuff coming up. And we got a lot of Marvel. Hopefully it's, I don't think 22 was the strongest year for Marvel. So let's see how they bounce back this year. Okay. So I think we'll go dive straight right into our top 10 lists. Alex, do you want to kick us off with your number 10 of 2022,
Yeah, absolutely.
in your opinion?
This is my opinion, guys. So my number 10 film of 2022 is Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was directed by the Daniels. It is a film that's kind of gained a lot of traction and a lot of love from a lot of people, and it's kind of quite obvious to see why. It's got a brilliant kind of family relationship at the center of it. It's this big multiverse crazy visual movie, whilst also being just like this just very small film about trying to connect with your mother or a mother trying to connect with her daughter. It truly is everything everywhere at once. It's huge and tiny all at the same time, with just some really kind of brilliant bizarre scenes which feel like they came from the brains of madmen, but just work at the same time. And some excellent action to go with it. You've got professional martial artist Michelle Yeoh in there doing her thing. It's a brilliant film. It's a brilliant film that I think is probably going to be a lot of people's number ones this year. But for me, my number 10.
Yeah, there was always like a dangerous expectation going into that movie because everybody was hyping it up so much online that by the time that we got to see it here in the UK, which was a lot later than the US, as mentioned before, you kind of go in with an expectation, and sometimes those things aren't met. For me, well, I'll get into it later on.
Oh,
Movie does appear on my list somewhere, but yeah, for me, it delivered on all those accounts. I think this is a really interesting movie, and also can tell us as audience that indie movies can be blockbusters as well. So that sets a new ideal, a new precedent.
so what is your number 10, Chris?
So my number 10 wasn't in my number 10 until last night. And then I had to really think about how this movie really actually impacted me over this year. And I feel like it's very it underperformed in terms of, I think a lot of people will really be interested in this movie and they'll really connect with it, and it's a really good mirror to our time at the minute. It's called We Met in Virtual Reality. It's a documentary that was released on HBO Max, although you can rent it over here in the UK at the moment. I don't think it's free for streaming. It is basically, the film is all filmed in VR. There's no talking heads, it's all recorded in engine, where we explore couples who've met virtually and haven't met in real life, but they literally live their lives um, in this little bubble, and is completely directed from COVID, where people had to sort of stay in lockdown and live in a bubble. I met people online and connected, and it's really to an outsider who's not into this world or really understands VR, it can be really strange because people are, they're going to strip clubs online. They're getting married. They're having like houses and families. There's even like deaf communities that teach each other like sign language. It's really beautiful. It's kind of like all encompassing things, and even though it's sort of at its conceptual stage at the minute, where it's still ironing out the edges and kind of primitive, people are really using it to its full form, and there's so much potential. There are people who struggle to get outside of their house and connect with people, so there's like an online yoga class where there's an actual instructor, and you can rig yourself up and you can actually perform with a class as your avatar, whether it's a guy with horns on his head or whether you're Kermit the Frog. You can all kind of work out together, and it's kind of a beautiful kind of movie about acceptance and being yourself, and nothing's too goofy. And I thought it was really sweet, and you're watching actually genuine relationships being mapped out and going forward, and people actually take us further post lockdown and meet each other in real life and actually do form really serious bonds. I thought it was really touching, and I think it really speaks to our time, where people are really struggling to connect with each other, and the world is becoming more and more uncertain, and we just need a bit of love and acceptance. So I thought it was a beautiful movie that I think a lot of people should check out.
Nice, nice. I actually haven't seen that film, so I think, to be fair, I don't think there's many on your top 10 I haven't seen. Maybe a couple. But
Mhm.
I mean, they're making your list, Chris, so it means I have to check them out.
Well, I thought that this was kind of dancing around my 12 to 10 spot. And I thought, this movie is really special. And I feel like a lot of people are never going to get around to seeing it just purely out of budget and marketing. So I felt like I needed to champion it. And it's definitely worthy of the top 10. It's a movie I think about a lot. So yeah. What about your number 9, Alex?
Okay, my number 9 is Prey, directed by
Mm.
Dan Trachtenberg, which is a bit of a I don't even know what you call it. Would you call it a reboot, a prequel, a reboot quel? I'm not really sure.
Kind of
To
fits
the
all of those. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of its own little segment in the Predator franchise, a
Hmm.
franchise that I'd not actually watched until this year. I think I watched the first one to get ready for this film, and then watched the kind of subsequent sequels afterwards. But I do think the Prey film is the best film in the Predator franchise, and it takes it to a really interesting place as we go way back in time, and we follow a Comanche tribe and one of their kind of skilled wannabe warriors, as she comes up against a very early version of the Predator.
Yeah.
Um, it's really kind of grimy and back to basics, but at the same time quite aware of kind of its historical setting. It's angry and violent and just
Yeah,
heaps of fun all at the same time. And I can't. I think it was only about like 90 minutes, wasn't it? It's like it's this short little angry film, with a really kind of vicious hunt in at the center of it. And yeah, no, I had a lot of fun with this film. We kind of get a great breakout role from Amber Mid Thunder here.
great name.
Amazing name. And yeah, it was very actually, the film is very kind of aware of its casting and everything, of actually bringing in kind of First Nations people to play the roles of the Comanche tribe itself. So yeah, it's an excellent fun little action film that I had a lot of time for, and ended up watching a couple of times as well, because I think it's just one of those films that even if you haven't seen any of the other Predator films, you can just kind of chuck this on and kind of really enjoy the fun that's to be had with it.
That's a really good pick. It didn't make my top 10 this year, but it was a movie I really, really enjoyed anyway. And I think you're right. I think it's this movie, like when you hear there's a Disney Plus original called Prey that's based on the Predator franchise, and you see the poster, you're like, oh, this is probably going to be a bit of a trashy movie. And then you see it, and it's like it's way better than it has any right to be, and it's way more interested in the village lifestyle and how the Comanches are represented, and even to the minute details, way more than you'd expect it to be. Which is a really cool little thing, and it's not very vocal about it. It's all just in the background while you've got this amazing sort of cat and mouse action movie you're watching at the same time. So, like I said, it's very stripped down, but there are layers to it, and it's just a really fun ride. So, yeah, that's a really good pick. Only just got out of my list this year. My number 9 pick, though, we're talking about best movies of the year. This is kind of related to my worst movie of the year.
Ah.
And actually, I saw your list, and we both have the Robert Zemeckis Disney Plus original Pinocchio as our worst movie of 2022.
It was
Pretty
my least favorite. Okay, yeah.
least favorite. Okay. Yeah, and it's not really in competition with anything else. It is pretty loudly and vocally my worst movie of 2022. So I thought I was a bit Pinocchio'd out. It was like,
Mm,
maybe the original 1930s Disney animation is the only one that kind of got it right. It's like, are we able to kind of make the story interesting again? And then comes along Maestro Guillermo del Toro and his cast of stop motion geniuses with his version of Pinocchio, which absolutely came later this year and just blew everybody out of the park. I believe it really manages to tap into the darkness of the original story. I read the book. I don't know about you. My grandfather gave me the book when I was a kid, and I read it, and it was like super super creepy, but I just couldn't stop reading it. It's completely opposed to what the Disneyfication of that character has become. But Guillermo surprised me with this movie, where I thought it was going to go into the macabre and kind of show us a sort of Pan's Labyrinth esque version of this story. Instead, we actually get a lot of heart. Probably more so than in any other iteration I've seen of this story.
mm,
It manages to really balance the two really well. We have extra elements that weren't in the movie before. We've got fascism, um, really kind of laced into this movie. A lot of father dynamics. It's almost like a father love triangle kind of going on, where we're seeing different versions of the father son relationship and the rights and wrongs of it. And I thought it was just a beautiful story that was obviously visually very beautiful too to look at. You're just watching it and you're in awe. Stop motion has always been something that's been really like um, a bit of a weakness for me. I just watch it and I'm really appreciative of it. And if the story is good as well, that's a bonus. And yeah, this is one of the highlights of animation this year.
absolutely. It was very, very close to making my top 10, which kind of surprised me. I was the same as yours, Pinocchio'd out.
Yeah,
And I don't understand. Well, I usually don't understand the obsession with wanting to constantly recreate different versions of Pinocchio. I'm never been that intrigued by the story, and I just didn't understand it. But here comes Guillermo del Toro, and he really took it to a different place, and it was the first time I truly understood the kind of the charm behind Pinocchio and why so many filmmakers are drawn to it. The kind of naivety of the character and the
Mm-hmm.
way he can be shaped and molded. And I thought the setting itself was just kind of really, really upped the themes and just made a really kind of unique version of this story that, for me, is now the number one version.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And it's really sweet, even though the film ends with him burying everybody he's ever loved because he lives forever. And
Yes.
it's just kind of
Yes.
like, but at the
Yes.
same time, I'm still weeping, and I'm like, this is so sweet. Like, I don't understand, but it's a brilliant, brilliant little film. Little film, not even a little film, just a brilliant film.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and it has. Oh, I'm trying to remember the final quote in the movie that the cricket says, and it's, it goes along something along the lines of, it has a really weird sentiment that should be really like sad and a downer, but it's actually really sweet at the end of the movie. It's like, we live our lives, that our lives are our lives, and we die, and it comes across as really sweet at the end of the movie. It's like it's
Mm.
almost telling us, be nice to people and kind of, live your life to the full, and fight against the oppressive, and just be a good person. And it comes across as a really like earned message at the end of the movie too. So yeah, it's really oddly sweet.
Yeah, it really stirred up emotions in me that I never thought I had for Pinocchio.
Yeah,
It was
you hated that little guy by a couple months ago.
yeah, exactly, and then this film came along and it's just full of charm and sweetness and but also the opening 20 minutes, the kind of prologue to the story,
Mhm.
is just something you've never seen before. I think from a Pinocchio film that kind of takes that an original father son relationship of Geppetto's son before he passes, and then kind of dives deep into that and really does take the father son relationship to new heights in this one.
As opposed to some weirdo Tom Hanks, um, a guy just dancing around his bedroom dreaming about a real boy. We actually get a little bit of reasoning to why he would
Yes.
do that.
Yes, and kind of why it's so kind of strange and creepy, but also kind of sweet all at the same
Mm,
time. Uh,
absolutely. So, Alex, what made your number 8
so
movie of 2022?
my number 8 is a film that maybe you'll be surprised at, Chris. I don't know, but it's a film that's I'll admit has many flaws, but at the same time really hit home for me. And I'm a massive nerd. It's the only Marvel film to make my top 10, and that is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever.
Oh.
Uh, I think if you take the little Marvelisms aside that kind of didn't work,
Hmm.
the shoehorned in characters and slightly dodgy CGI at times, I think our director Ryan Coogler has made a touching tribute to the first film's late star, a brilliant sequel to that original Black Panther film, and really kind of exploring the depths of the Marvel universe as he's just so good at bringing in these cultures and creating new worlds with them that also touch on kind of real aspects of our own histories and cultures. And I really love the world of Black Panther. I really love the
Hmm.
characters of Black Panther, and I think he moved them forward in a really touching way. Um, I think it was a worthy sequel to the first film, and I had a lot of fun with it. It is, I think it's an epic. I think the kind of it's not a small film. It's a big Marvel film, but it's got a lot of heart at the center of it, and just deals with some things that I think would have scared any other director who lost the star of its film before filming it. I think
Oh yeah.
it's a really kind of well crafted story, And like I said, it's got its little Marvel flaws, but I think I can see past them when there's so much good at the center of this film. And I had a great time with it. I had a brilliant, brilliant time with it. I left the cinema equal parts happy and sad for
Mm.
all the right reasons. So Black Panther, there you go. I didn't think a Marvel film would make my top 10 this year, but Black Panther came at the end there and nipped it in the bud.
Well, I would certainly agree that I love the world of Black Panther, and the first film directed by Ryan Coogler would have been worthy of a top 10 list for me. I really enjoyed that. It's one of my favorite Marvel films. Yeah, I don't know if I can completely, agree with your sentiment. I'm really glad that you managed to emotionally invest in the movie. For me, yeah, it's not an enviable position for Coogler to be in to direct a movie like this. The sheer logistics of how to sort of drive the story and the narrative is kind of a minefield in of itself. Um, I feel like the meta um, sentimental side of dealing with T'Challa's death and obviously real life Chadwick Boseman's death was really well handled. But then for me, that then became the sort of the branch in the tree for the subplots to balance on. And then it became to me just a collection of subplots that were really directed in the right way, especially the Dominique Thorne who plays Ironheart. I felt like her story was really shoehorned in here, and the stuff with Martin Martin Freeman as well is kind of thrown in. I didn't really connect with it because it was just all over the place. But that's fine. I feel like a lot of people are a bit more connected to this universe than I am, so they bring a lot more to it than I do. Yeah, it wasn't the strongest film for me this year.
That's fair. That's fair. I think sometimes epics are messy, and I think it was an epic. But yeah, no, that's fair. I didn't think I'd see Black Panther on your top 10 list, and part of me is somewhat surprised it's on mine. But I keep coming back to it and just really kind of enjoying the whole experience of seeing it, and just being surprised in a way that it
Mm.
turned out as well as it did when it seemed to have a lot set against it.
Very good, Alex. Okay, so my number eight film of 2022 was another sort of like slow burn sleeper hit of the year, and I really love the horror genre, and I feel like not enough people give that genre credit in their lists every year. So my nod to horror is Barbarian, which came out this year, which is a very a very interesting movie. A movie that you go to the cinema and half the crowd walk out of. It's one of those. It really plays with you in terms of its mechanics, in a way that feels kind of really earned. I actually feel it's not doesn't do that Shyamalan thing where it's like there's a twist in it and that completely ruins the next experience. I think it'll be interesting to rewatch this film with all the pieces back together. Yeah, it basically is set on a young woman who's going for a job interview, and she arrives at an Airbnb one late, rainy, ominous evening, and she knocks on the door, and Bill Skarsgård's there. Which never is really a good sign because, as we know, he is Pennywise the clown, and he usually doesn't play nice guys in movies, and John Wick as well. Um, so she arrives at this house. He's already booked in. There seems to be a mistake, an error in their booking that they're both double booked in this place. She's got nowhere else to stay, and she's miles away from anywhere else. So she makes a pretty cautious decision, and I feel like she's in her right mind to be pretty nervous. And she cautiously comes in, and they spend the night together. And yeah, he seems nice but sort of creepy. We're kind of on tender hooks with him. Um, but the movie kind of goes from there, and it goes in really ways that you don't expect it to go. It's kind of like one movie the first half, the first third, and then turns into another movie the second third, and then another movie the third part of it. So yeah, we get interesting characters that get introduced halfway through the story. It pulls the rug underneath you in terms of its shock value. My mouth was agape many times watching this movie. There was genuine tension, genuine fear that managed to be balanced out by some laugh out loud hilarious moments. So it really just kind of really played with me. I was kind of a puppet on the strings for this movie, and I feel like the filmmaker really achieved what he needed to do here, and kind of, and also being a good social commentary at the same time by having some mirrored events that are kind of going on the last couple of years, with Hollywood in terms of the patriarchy and how that's kind of used in the Me Too movement. And there's some laugh out loud moments. There's a moment in the movie where we kind of get this douchebag character kind of gets introduced, that he's being accused and he actually owns the Airbnb, and he comes back and he is trying to capitalize on the property value of so he discovers a basement where events of the movie happen at the beginning, and it looks pretty creepy and ominous, and to our eyes obviously you should not be there. There's a hidden camera down there, get the hell out of there. And he's just started measuring the property and uses it as a lucrative experience to gain more money for the meter squared of rate of the building. It's a really fun moment. But yeah, I don't want to spoil it too much for people, but I had a really good fun time with this movie.
I actually watched it last night.
Oh, right, okay.
It was well, one of the last films I've seen within the last 24 hours. It is a kind of crazy horror film that really gets out there by the second half, and I know we're dancing around it because I think it is one of those films you really want to know nothing. And I think you reviewed it earlier in the year in one of our podcast episodes. You did a really good job of kind of making me intrigued, but at the same time not giving me the full breadth of the film, and I thank you for that, because I was really kind of shocked and surprised by a lot of it. It probably wouldn't have made my top 10 even if I'd had some time to sit on it, if I'm going to be honest. I think it's one of the horror films do this a lot, where you kind of just have to go along with the characters' stupid decisions. And you're like, why would you go to that cabin in the woods? Here, I think there's quite a lot of those moments where you really have to be like, really? Why are you going back into this house?
Because she's a good person, that's why.
Yeah, but too much has happened, man. Too much has happened. Yeah, there are elements of that kind of took me out of the film a bit. But I mean, I was kind of still very positive, and would heap lots of praise on this film. I think it's a brilliant horror film.
Absolutely.
That might be a good segue to hit my number 7, which is a horror film as well. I guess yeah, it is a horror film. It is a horror film, bit of a thriller, I would say, as well to it, which is The Black Phone. Directed by Scott Derrickson, who I think is a brilliant director. He did the Sinister films. He did the first Doctor Strange film. I think he's a really, really interesting director. And here he has teamed up with Ethan Hawke once again, who plays this kind of creepy kidnapper, who ends up kidnapping the wrong 13-year-old boy, I would say.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of supernatural elements to it, as well as our main character, Finney, is kind of stuck in this basement where he's been taken, and uses there's like a phone. There's why it's called the Black Phone, where he can speak to like the dead souls of other kids who have been kidnapped and killed by this guy, as they kind of help him piece together all the different ways that they've tried to escape, and he kind of uses all of them to try and figure that out. I think it's a really smart film. It's a very violent film. A lot of kid-on-kid violence, which is quite brutal. And it just really kind of makes... I can't remember the exact... Was it like 70s it's set? I can't remember. It's been a little minute.
Yeah, it's... Yeah, prime serial killer kidnapping era.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It really plays on the
that
kind
aesthetic.
of fear of that era, of kind of like, I don't know about you, but whenever I watch like a Netflix documentary on a serial killer, and there's tons of them, it just feels like, geez, everybody was being killed in the 70s. Like, you couldn't escape.
Man or woman, no one was safe. You just don't go anywhere by yourself, basically.
If you were a kid, you were being kidnapped. If you were a woman, you were being killed, just didn't sound like a great place. I'm sure the country's so big, it wasn't always like that, but it just plays on those kind of feelings. I remember stupidly coming out the cinema being like, that felt like um like a Stephen King film. Like it felt
Yeah,
like
it's
a
like the
Stephen
book
King
we never
film.
got from Stephen
Yeah,
King,
the
isn't
book
it?
we never got from Stephen King. Turns out his son wrote it, so that kind of makes a lot of sense. Or it's based on the book,
Makes
based
sense.
on a short story, I think, that his son wrote.
Hmm.
So yeah, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree on that one. Yeah, no, I absolutely loved everything about this film. I had a really good time, and I'm a sucker for films that kind of do a lot of setup and then
Yes.
pay it off really well at the end. Like there's so many little things that kind of play into the final act. And it kind of it's like a horror film that leaves you like punch in the air at the end.
Oh
And you're
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, go get
You
him, yeah.
because it turns into an escape movie where you kind of really, I think it does a lot in terms of what Stephen King books do really well, is that he makes you hate everybody who's over the age of a teenager. All adults suck, all
Yep.
parents are terrible people, and yeah, and it really does the legwork in making you on the side of the kids. Finney in this instance, hasn't got a good dad. Mum's out the picture, and a sister who's also really very likable and hasn't had a good share of luck either. So we're already on the side of these kids, but we're also sort of intrigued about the Ethan Hawke character, as there's a supernatural element involved in it too. So there's a lot of intrigue. But yeah, you are punching your fist by the end of the movie, kind of wanting. It's like a revolt in a way. Yeah, I thought it was a strong movie. I thought it was just like a good movie. There was elements of it, especially in the third act. I don't feel like it really solicited the emotion I thought it was going to solicit from. I think its strongest moments are the shock value, in terms of how the dynamics with the parents and the kids are. The violence is very shocking, and the acting from the kids is probably some of the best child acting I have seen these
Mm.
last few years. That was
Yeah, the
something I wasn't
young the,
expecting.
the young girl who plays his sister,
Yes,
who
she's
has these
amazing.
kind of psychic powers, potentially kind of passed on from her mother.
Yeah.
Um, there's a lot of good stuff going on there.
Yeah, there's a particularly distressing scene with her where she just absolutely nails the realism to an uncomfortable level. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, you're like, "Geez, do they make this little girl cry on set? This is traumatic."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's that good. No, that's a really good pick though, Alex. My number seven is a movie I feel like a lot of people really like. I haven't heard too many people diss on this movie actually, which I'm quite surprised, because it's quite a more subtle movie than I think a lot of people would have expected from this director,
Mm,
being Martin McDonagh. It's his film, The Banshees of Inisherin, starring everybody's favorite duo, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. It's like they've only really had been a duo in one movie, but that movie in Bruges is so like iconic that it's like they're Abbott and Costello or something like that. It's like these guys have been together forever and they just work on screen together. Um, yeah, it's kind of about two lifelong friends living on a small island off the coast of Ireland, kind of set at about, turn of the century, is sort of like beginning of the 1900s.
mm.
And one day, Brendan Gleeson's character just straight up says, "I don't want to be friends with you anymore," and straight up ignores Colin Farrell. And it's funny because he gives him no reason to, and we as an audience are intrigued as to why. Is it vanity? Is there something more deeper going on? Is there something historically between these two characters? And Colin Farrell's character is just completely as befuddled as we are, and completely obsessed to find the answer, why. And it becomes a very interesting movie, um, about death, really, um, and kind of accepting people and not being too attuned to your vanity and how important that is. The Brendan Gleeson character is so obsessed with his image and his legacy. It's a movie really about legacy and what you leave behind, where we are more attuned to Colin Farrell's character, where, is there anything wrong with just being a nice person? That's kind of like a real sentiment of the movie that really stuck with me. Is like, is it more important to be remembered for creating a great piece of music, or is it better to be remembered as somebody who was really nice and people can look back on fondly? And yeah, as well as other things the movie's got going on its mind, that's something that I thought was really sweet. And the movie's also, you know, a Mark McDonagh movie, so it's going to be really, really funny too.
Yes, yeah.
So it definitely had a lot of laughs in here too.
I watched this one the other day. Finally caught up with it in that mad New Year rush as you try to
Mm-hmm.
watch the films that might make your top 10. It was very close. I thought it was brilliant, really, really funny, witty, and kind of really felt like Martin McDonagh even kind of looking back into his own kind of instincts with other films, the kind of brutal violence and kind of these men, and really kind of diving deep into like where those things are coming from. I thought the film was more about loneliness. That's kind of
Mm.
where it came to me, like loneliness and boredom and
Oh
what
yeah,
we do to try keep ourselves entertained, even if it means just cutting off your friend just to feel something. Um, and yeah, it's one of those films where it almost feels quite painful in a way. I don't know about you, Chris, but I thought about what would happen if you just stopped talking to me, and I thought,
mm.
God, that doesn't feel very nice. And I really kind of sympathised with
Yeah.
Colin Farrell, really trying to like dive deep into kind of understanding where sudden this sudden kind of anger and disappointment comes
Yeah,
from, and how it kind of unravels him. Yeah, I think the sentiment of can you just be a nice guy and
yeah.
what it means to be a nice guy, um, and do you
It's
just
interesting.
need to let people walk over you, or is it an element of sometimes you have to be bad
Mm,
to be good? It's a really interesting film, that is kind of unlike anything else out this year.
yeah, which really like is undercut with the humor. I mean, what you literally said was kind of vocalized in the movie where Brendan Gleeson's at a confession with the priest of the church, and the priest is like, why are you not talking to him anymore? And he's like, well, it's not a sin, is it, Father? Well, it's also not very nice, is it? Which is very true. So you never lose the humor, but it really captures that melancholy so well. And I think that Mark McDonagh, I think his earlier efforts, although I really, really enjoyed them, especially in Bruges, can be heavy-handed with its themes, and sometimes you can question the moral in McDonagh's thinking. I think this is him kind of finding a really good sweet spot between the tones and
Yeah.
delivering something that is kind of effective and thought-provoking and will be kind of studied and really interesting to follow back on and look back on in future years.
Yeah, I was. It was a lot more kind of restrained than I ever thought it was going to be. I was almost waiting for the grand act of violence, and I know obviously we get some pretty brutal finger moments, which. But I don't know about you, but I was waiting for. Is it Barry Keoghan? Is that you must know
Barry
how to
Keegan, yeah,
Keegan? There you go.
yeah.
Yeah, I knew you didn't know how to say his last name. I was almost waiting for his character to just spiral and I don't know
He's
cause
great.
mass murder on the island. And I think maybe had this been another Martin McDonagh film, maybe that would have been the way it was going to go. But
Mhm.
it kind of goes into a more kind of even sad place there
Yeah, I
in
mean
a way that really shocked me.
the whole thing of his character is that we're, to the audience he's just a buffoon and kind of like the laughing stock of the village, and Colin Farrell uses him as a sort of as a podium because at least I'm not as bad or dim-witted as that guy,
Yeah,
but also at the same time it's quite an unassuming thing with his character where that kind of creeps up and there's more layers to him as well as what you originally would see in the first act of the movie. So yeah, there's some surprises and it really catches up with you, and it's abstract as well as being grounded. It just I think he just hit it out of the park here, and yeah, I'm always excited for when a McDonagh film comes out, and hopefully this is a tone that he sticks with and has found a sweet spot with.
nice. Guess that takes us to my number 6 film, which is Athena. We spoke in length about this film in a previous episode. Um, it's this French Revolution in a council estate, essentially, which also acts as a massive war film between the residents there and the police,
Yeah.
touching on kind of um, police brutality and right wing politics and the act of the media and stuff like this. But not in a way that feels like it's pandering towards any kind of side. It kind of, if anything, I think what we mentioned in the episode was like its politics kind of skew in a kind of mishmash way, like it's trying to please everyone and doesn't really
Mm.
work out too well. But I mean, the ride along the way is probably one of the most kind of rip roaring visual spectacles of the year, with these incredible long shots. I dare anybody to watch the first 10 minutes of the film and not finish the film, because
Yeah.
the opening 10 minutes of an uncut shot as our kind of protesters raid a police station and nick their weapons and vehicles and drive back to their estate is one of the most kind of like thrilling 10 minutes of a film I've ever seen, and really kind of
Mm.
gets you into the gear of like, yeah, I'm excited, and this film doesn't really let up. It's just like a roller coaster from start to end of kind of crazy revolution. And yeah, I mean, I think between this and watching the Star Wars show Andor, I was ready to I was ready for a revolution,
Up in
baby.
arms.
I'll watch the final episode of Andor and watch this, and I'm ready to fight the
You're ready to
system,
go.
baby.
No, dude, I completely agree with you. I think this is one of the strongest opening sequences of this year, 100%. And I can still remember, even though it's a 10-minute sequence, I can remember almost shot for shot what went on there. It's just it's so well constructed. Um, it's almost boggles the mind, and especially with such a stripped back sort of budget. This isn't like a big, well produced, produced movie. This is like using every tool you have in the box to make something that's as epic as possible, and it
Mm,
really hits all that. I would say that the third act or the second half of the movie kind of lets itself down when it gets a bit bogged down on the brotherly and on one of the brothers. I think when it loses one of its vital characters, one in particular, who's kind of our vehicle for really pushing the revolt. I think that's when the movie starts to kind of turn on its head a little bit, and maybe lost me when it kind of get bogs down in the melodrama. But on a pure spectacle anger point of view, and I thought it was really arresting.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I didn't feel too let down by the second half. I definitely think there's some kind of murky moments, but I think for the whole film, my heart was pumping. I was just like,
Mhm.
this is probably one of the best war films I've seen in a long time.
That nobody
And
is saying and everybody needs to see.
exactly, it's so strange. It's such a. I mean, there must be some money behind it because it's feels like a big film.
Hmm.
Yet kind of just dropped on Netflix very quietly with no fanfare, and yeah, everybody I've spoken to who's seen the film seems to really, really, really enjoy it. So doesn't make any sense to me. Netflix doesn't make any sense to me. How they do things,
No,
I don't
streaming doesn't
understand.
make sense to me in general.
Some of them do it right, like with the cinema release and then the streaming. Like even Disney gets that to an extent. Their windows have become a bit short
I
potentially. That give it a couple weeks, it'll be on Disney Plus. I think there's
That's the thing. I
some.
don't get I don't get the Disney model. I watched Strange World last night, and that was a movie that was had a limited release in cinemas, and nobody went to see it. Absolutely bombed. One of the biggest box office bombs this last year, and yeah, again, it's not one of the trending watches on Disney Plus, considering that it only came out in the last week on the platform too. So, and you can see the movie, like so much money spent on these big productions. They are big theatrical releases, like in terms of how they look and how they feel. And you're like, what is the angle at the minute? There's so many of these. Like Halloween was littered with like sequels, like Hocus Pocus 2 or Disenchanted, and people, they're popular for a week and then they don't exist anymore. So it's interesting, the whole landscape of streaming. But yeah, I hope hopefully it's just a trend that's not going to last forever, or they'll find some way to make it work better. But yeah, I feel like people are getting a bit more lazy with what they watch.
Yeah, I agree, and I think Netflix are the worst at it, especially with Glass Onion. I don't understand why they didn't release that for a little bit longer than a week, because most cinemas didn't pick it up because it was only in the cinema for a week. I would have loved to have seen that in the cinema, but there you go.
There you go. My number 6 film of 2022 is a movie I know that you absolutely love to death, and that is The Worst Person in the World. I originally didn't consider this, but I remembered. Oh yeah, this actually was a 22 release over here. So it just feels like a long time ago I saw this movie. But no, I had to consider it for this list because it left such an impact on me. It's kind of chronicles 4 years in the life of a young woman called Julie. He's sort of trying to navigate the waters um, of her love life, as well as trying to kind of navigate her indifference to everything around her, her struggle to connect, or function in ways that sort of bore her, and it's sort of relatable. I really appreciate that we're starting to get female characters in films that aren't necessarily initially like angels or manifestations of what a perfect woman is. We're all people, so we all have issues, and I thought it was a really good exploration. It's such a really remarkable film from Trier. I know something that was really it's probably going to make your list. This is the one I'm going to know that this is like going to make your list already. So we've talked about this movie in length before. Yeah, I'm sure you feel the same way.
I might do. I know what you mean about putting it on the list, wondering how because it was a bit of a, I think it was like a bit of a 2021 festival darling, but had its wide release in the States and the UK this year, or 2022 now. So it's kind of one of those ones where all the critics had seen it, but us general audiences mainly hadn't. So yeah, it makes my list, and I'll speak further on it later on. So, guys, we are splitting up our 2022 episode so that it isn't a ridiculously long episode that nobody ever listens to. So, this episode, we have gone through our 10 to 6. I don't even know how numbers work anymore. Films. Just to kind of overall the episode, my number 10 was Everything Everywhere All at Once. My number 9 was Prey. My number 8 was Black Panther Wakanda Forever. My number 7 was The Black Phone. And my number 6 was Athena. Chris?
My number 10 film was We Met in Virtual Reality. Number 9 was Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. Number 8 was Barbarian. Number 7, The Banshees of Inisherin. And number 6 was The Worst Person in the World.
Excellent. Join us next week when we will go through our 5 to 1 best films, our favourite films of 2022.
Some heavy hitters here.
To be continued. This has been the Film Angle for this week. I'm Alex.
And I'm Chris.
See you next week.
Goodbye.